She's not gonna get any more money.
Yeah, no.
We just said she could work on the new office. She still got the same shit.
All right, 6 o'clock. Let's get started with the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you everybody for joining us for the August 15th, 2022 City Council meeting in Credit River. We're going to begin with approving or amending the agenda. Does anybody have any changes they'd like to make to the agenda tonight? Not having any, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Al. I've got a motion and a second to approve the agenda as written tonight. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Consent agenda. Those items on the council agenda which are considered routine, non-controversial, are included as part of the consent agenda. Unless a council member specifically requests that an item on the consent agenda be removed and considered separately, items on the consent agenda are considered under one motion, a second, and a vote. Any item removed from the consent agenda shall be placed at the end of general business. Tonight on the consent agenda, we have resolution 2022-26 Flieger edition. And part A to that, it would be Flieger ESCO release. And then number 2 would be Metro copier lease renewal. Is there any item on the consent agenda tonight that any council member would like to separate and consider separately? Otherwise, I would take a motion to approve consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Al.
Second.
Thank you, Brent. I've got a motion and a second to approve consent agenda tonight. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. The public forum is intended to afford the public an opportunity to address concerns to the council. The public forum will be no longer than 30 minutes in length, and each presenter will have no more than 5 minutes to speak. Topics of discussion are restricted to local governmental topics rather than private or political agendas. The council may discuss but will not take formal action on public forum presentations tonight. Anybody like to speak in public forum, open forum tonight? Ted? Amy? Amy or Ted, one of you guys flew? Should we flip a coin? I think you lost part of your 5 minutes in that discussion.
I was just checking on where we at on Board of Exchange for the PNR show. Where we at in the process?
I would actually. Planner Cindy Nash, if you please. Yeah. Hold that green, but hold it down, Ted. There you go. You're good. Cindy, if you'd.
Yep, so thank you, Mr. Mayor. The ordinance drafted in process, there should be a draft of it sent to the DNR for their review next week, and it will be at planning commission for a public hearing, probably at this.
Okay.
Great.
Does that answer
Good
your
enough.
question, Ted?
It did. Thank you very
Perfect.
much.
Awesome. Amy, you're next.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Amy Olson. I've had the joy of serving as your election administrator here in 2022. I just wanted to give a quick update. We had the primary election on Tuesday. We had incredible turnout with about 500 people casting ballots in person and 23 casting by absentee. And all of this is just a credit to our wonderful election judges. Karen Donovan has done a wonderful job of recruiting new election judges this year. We've had many veterans return, and they've done just a wonderful job of making sure that free and fair elections are possible here in Credit River and in Scott County. I want to give a special thanks to our head judge, Tanya Fitzgerald, who's just done a remarkable job. So we get to start the whole process again coming up in September with absentee voting, as well as leading up to the primary, or pardon me, the general election in November. So I just wanted to articulate my thanks to the wonderful contributions that were made. It was a long day. We had some good laughs along the way, and we've served the community, I believe, with distinction. So thank you very much.
Amy, before you step away, I just want to say thank you very much. Amy Olson stepped in kind of late to the game to be our election administrator this year and did a fabulous job picking up and taking on a huge role to make the primary a successful election here. For those who came through, by all accounts, it was nice and quick and easy and painless. We didn't sound like there was any problems or anything. So we really appreciate the hard work you and the election judges put into this, Amy, and we look forward to November where you had the preseason. Now
Now we're on to the big time.
Right?
We're on to Sunday night football coming up.
absolutely.
But really,
So,
all credit goes to the wonderful judges, Karen's dedicated efforts to make sure that we recruited new and brought back our experienced judges. I couldn't have done it without Bill, couldn't have done it without the Bergs. Thank you so much. There are others who will receive notes of thanks
Mhm.
coming up, but to all who served, thank you. You are instrumental in preserving democracy in the United States and here in Credit River.
thank you, Amy. Thank you to you and the election judges. Anybody else for open forum tonight?
Is this the appropriate time to ask questions regarding the Northern Natural Gas?
No, that's an item that's on the agenda tonight. Okay, with that, I'm going to close open forum. No public hearings tonight, and so then we will move into general business. Item number 1 is Northern Natural Gas. 2 items to consider for that: a second driveway variance and then a resolution for a conditional use permit. And I will start with planner Cindy Nash with an introduction to the subject.
Thank you. Do you want me to share my screen or do you want to? Share
Yeah,
that?
if you have it ready. I don't have mine ready.
Oh, I don't have it ready.
Okay,
I was gonna.
which one would you like to
the
share?
site plan, 5.1 and the plan so that everybody here and online. can see them. Thank you. So what we have tonight is 2 applications. The first one ends up being a variance application from your driveway ordinance for a second driveway on the parcel. They're asking for that because it's a non-residential, non-typical residential use. So rather than having the driveway come off of the existing driveway from the home, they're asking for a second driveway on it to provide direct access to this easement site that they own already. The main application is the conditional use permit for a town border station. The property is located at 7120 196th Street East. As you can see on the screen, it's right in the southwest corner of the property. They are preserving the site triangle so that there is not any concerns from an ordinance standpoint with being able to have viewing around the corner. So that's why you see that triangle cloud there. They're doing staggered trees that are 12 to 15 feet tall around the perimeter of the site, except in those locations where they can't do so because the driveway would be coming in, or where there is an underground pipe or something coming into the site, or a gate above another type. Right now, the landscape plans show one tree as to be determined in terms of type. And we'll put that through with them if this is approved, in terms of the type that it would be a coniferous tree that does not lose its leaves. There's 3 buildings proposed on the site. They're shown basically in the northeast corner of the eastern area, along with various other mechanical improvements contained within the property as well. There'd be a 6-foot tall fence surrounding the site inside of the tree line, and for security and protection. There should be some people from NNG here this evening to make some comments to you as well if they entertain them. And otherwise, I'll stand for questions. When you do make any motions, we'd ask you to consider the driveway first, followed by the commission.
Okay. Any questions or comments from council from Planner Nash before? Brent?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So NNG applies for the driveway permit. It's not the resident that owns the property.
Correct.
Okay. Sir, I think from NNG, if you don't mind stepping up to the podium, please. And if you don't mind, we have other representatives from Northern Natural Gas as well. If you guys would do me a favor and let us know what your names are.
My name is Tristan Sarvis. I'm one of the mechanical engineers for NNG.
And my name is Steven Martinez. I'm the regional manager for Northern here in the North Region.
Okay. Is there any comments to start out that you guys would like to talk to us about this project at all?
The only thing, just as Cindy said, we've submitted a CUP application for a 200 by 200 foot area for a conditional use permit. And we're asking for your approval on that this evening.
Okay. Perfect. Council members, anybody have any questions of Northern Natural Gas on this project?
I guess I have one. You did a nice job, I think, collating and interspersing questions you had gotten by email or by maybe the feedback website. The one that I didn't see addressed there was the timing, the speed, and that it was brought to the Credit River City Council. I think all the other questions were addressed in there. Do you guys have any comments on that?
Are you referring to the time of the application or the time of when construction?
Yeah, just the homeowners that were around there or other residents that had given comments. It looked like a lot of every other question was laid out in your red lined question and answer, but that one wasn't. Do you want me to, I can repeat the question they wrote to you again if you'd like.
They probably not. That question specifically,
Okay.
they were.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Maybe you didn't get it. Would you still like to hear the question?
Yeah, we could hear it
Please
and possibly
ask the
address it.
question.
I gotta pull it back up, so I use their words. If you have someone who wants to comment, I could pull it up separately.
Well, while you're waiting on that, I guess I have a couple questions for you. Number one, site, choosing this site. What factors did played into choosing this site? I know your pipeline is X amount of feet further to the north. There is some open property in between. Why choosing to come all the way down to this site?
Yeah, so we originally had planned for the location to be directly above our pipes, but because of some wetland impacts, we had to move it further to the south. The neighboring landowners, as we continued to go, denied the facility easement, and we stopped at the one that was able to grant us the facility.
Okay.
The question, I guess, in their own words was, why is this project being pushed through so fast? Why weren't we informed earlier of NNG's plans? I think there was another one that had a similar wording that said no one was aware of this until 10 days prior to the we were notified of this project only 10 days prior to the planning commission meeting that approved the project.
I wouldn't be able to address why you guys didn't have more time, other than we submitted the application in a timely fashion. We were ready to construct the project. In addition to that, we've been planning this location since 2019. We acquired the easements in 2020, and the project was delayed, waiting for customer input until this year. We submitted the application in a timely fashion that's required by the council or through the planning commission. So we met the obligations of the timing for that. We submitted all of those applications within the time periods it's there. So I wouldn't be able to answer as far as the public notice side.
So that's a good point. If you've acquired this in 2020, why wouldn't you have reached out earlier in the process?
We wouldn't have an obligation to obtain the CUP until we have all of the information known to us that's needed as part of the project. We may start planning a project earlier years, but all of the mechanics and how that design needs to come together may take some time to put together. So once we had the final plan, we submitted the application as appropriate.
What's the time frame, both average and median, that you would approach city councils for your other substations?
Well, this is a town border station, but for these
border
locations,
station.
it's within the time periods that's allotted by your
That's
governing.
not what I
rules.
asked at a lot of that said, as Northern Natural Gas, what's your internal practices to approach homeowners and city councils when you have to put in a large town substation?
Sure. So we notified the landowners who were directly impacted this immediately as soon as we knew that acquisition would be needed. Worked through those negotiations, which are private matters, acquired the easements that are needed. And then once we move forward with the project, once we have all of the items needed, we would submit the application. There's not necessarily a needed timeline for that.
Okay, then my follow-up question is, so a project that's been in the works since 2019, you didn't know until 45 days ago that this is where the town substation needed to go?
No, we knew about it, but we didn't apply for the application until it was time for us and we had all of the items to do so.
Okay, what about the other answers you gave about the notification of the homeowners and so forth that would be affected by this and the planning for it?
Was that just the property owners that you're acquiring easement from?
That's all I mean, that's who we would notify. We don't notify surrounding landowners. We don't have a requirement to do that.
I understand requirements, but being a good neighbor, maybe something different.
Yeah, so we are regulated by FERC and they have specific items as far as projects and how they fall. This falls underneath our blanket certificate. And that doesn't require neighboring landowner notification, such as a section 7 would, where we would notify adjoining landowners. Most of the individuals that have attended the meetings and expressed concern still wouldn't have been notified about that project either because they're not abutters to the project. While they're across the street, the technical abutter in this position would be the road. So that's where it would stop at. So we've notified everybody who's directly impacted and anybody who abuts the project for this particular parcel has been notified.
If you didn't have internal knowledge as an employee of Northern Natural Gas and you lived across the street from this, would you like to hear about it more than 45 days before it's gonna happen?
I mean, I'm not sure why you guys, I would send it back to Cindy because that's what your guys' requirements are as far as submitting a conditional use permit application. That's the timeline that you guys have. We submit it by deadline and then go through that process.
I follow you. You followed all the bylines to the last day, but I think you're seeing a lot of people here in front of you that are concerned that this has been in planning for a long time and they have a lot of concerns as the people who have to live next to it. And they haven't had adequate time to probably digest and process it and give the feedback they want. So I think we're probably going to hear about that tonight, but I think that's kind of the concern for myself.
Brent, anything?
Yeah, does the sale of the property where the home is located have any bearing on this at all?
No, the easement's a private matter. We acquired the easement from the landowner in early 2020. It is a perpetual easement, which would run with the property. Even if the property was sold to another landowner, that easement would remain in full force.
So why would you buy an easement rather than not like buy that part of the parcel?
Yeah, it's a good question. We don't want to own the property, for one, and for two, it's easier to obtain an easement than to go through like a zoning ordinance change to obtain them. Most of our facilities are in place by way of facility easements. We don't necessarily need to own that particular property in order to be operational with an easement grant.
Talk a little bit about your design of the screening around this site, please.
And
Look, in general, we see circles on the paper. Height, types of trees, what is in general when in other sites that you screened in a similar way, what does that look like?
yeah, so these would be 10 to 15 foot evergreen trees that would be planted. We've sent a note over to Cindy's team to let them know that we're open to suggestions as to what types of trees they'd like to see. I guess there was a concern about needles falling off or something in one of the trees that were proposed. We're completely open to that. There was not a requirement to provide vegetational screening here, but we did just to soften the location as to where it's going to be, given the fact that it is in a neighborhood. So we designed it with staggering trees to try to eliminate the visibility into the station. In addition to that, we placed a black PVC fence is what would be on the back side of it for two reasons. One, it'd be vinyl coated so it doesn't corrode and cause problems. And two, it's kind of blends in with the trees more so. So we did place them in a staggering manner so that it does kind of obscure the view of the station.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, they are full grown trees. So we're not planting 3-foot trees waiting 20 years for them to grow. We're addressing the matter up front by providing a full grown vegetational screening, which is usually not what happens. Usually you see stations like this getting smaller vegetational screening, and then you have to wait the 20 years. But we're trying to be as diverse as we can coming into the community and softening it up just a little bit so that it's not as an immediate intrusive item as it would appear to be.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question other than
Councilmember.
the screening, the noise abatement or the noise that will be given off from this? The answers were kind of nebulous. And maybe we have the engineer here I think that's probably a real concern for someone who's living across the street from this in a neighborhood instead of on a county highway that has constant traffic, which might have been another proposed site I believe you guys had with the county. Can you talk about I understand your answer to the Minnesota noise pollution laws and being under the guidelines, but it doesn't answer the question of how many times are there gonna be large noises from gas pressure changes on a hourly basis? What hours of the day are these going to occur? What can the people who live around this expect to hear from this, other than just see it?
The gas noise level shouldn't ever really be above a talking volume. It's a pretty quiet station because there's no compression, no engines or motors, just gas flowing. We operate on a 16-hour day, so it wouldn't be an all-day thing, but that varies from time of year on when the actual gas would be flowing through that station. But it would never be above talking level for the most part, as far as I know. I know we talked about noise studies. I don't know. Stephen, we got more on that. Yeah, we did propose, we are actually this week collecting the current ambient noise, so that we can provide information after the station's constructed as to what those levels change, but we will operate within the standards of the Minnesota MPCA in regards to the noise. We're very confident that those are going to be at or below normal talking for most of the time that we're aware of. We don't have any information that there would be scheduled noise above that currently.
What about odor? Is there regulation to this where it might be blow offs or pressure reductions, added, scent to the gas at the station?
On our end of things, we don't have any odorization. That is something that the customer that we're delivering the gas to provides.
Then will they provide that on this site?
I am not sure what they have decided on for this site yet, but that is something that I believe Minnesota law requires us. So I can't comment on what they've decided on.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Right.
So you're gonna be planting the trees, they're gonna be larger trees. And that's an advantage. Who maintains the trees? We've got new trees, watering, there's no water on site.
Yep, understood. So it's Northern Natural Gas's responsibility as a condition of the CUP that's presented before you this evening for approval. So that recommendation is in there. It's our responsibility. They're our trees. They're on our property. If they were to die or to start to dwindle away, there is a requirement within the CUP that would require us to respond adequately to address those concerns.
Anything else? Probably just the reserve to give feedback to the public as they comment. And probably give these guys the right to respond as well.
Okay. So,
The building,
You know, I think the building is.
the actual. That's that.
yeah, I think that's a statement. One of the things that we've heard a lot, and as I would suggest be one of the conditions of the permit would be, other than the metal siding, a faux stucco. I've seen it at one of your other stations, that one's actually covered in like a faux brick rather than just the metal barn siding.
It's something that we can look into. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be a requirement of the CUP. I didn't see anything in the building standards that would say that suggest that that has to be a reason. But I'm not saying no to it. It's something that we're willing to review. And we can continue to work with Cindy after the fact as far as aesthetics goes.
The one on Mushtown Road,
Mhm.
looks like it was recently upfitted with a faux brick.
There are,
facing on
yes, sir. There are some applications that we could do. Because of the timing and when this is being done, it may be a scenario where it's installed as a metal building and that's installed later because of timing and availability of materials currently. But it's something we can review and look into. If it's something we could do, we definitely would be willing to accommodate that.
it. Mhm. I think there's probably importance in that, considering it's in a neighborhood.
Sure, we can review it.
So it's the timing because this has to get up and running right away. So
So
what's the estimated time that when this is going to be doing what it's supposed to do? Operate.
you mean when will this go into
Construction.
service?
When is the construction over
Complete.
and this plant does what it's supposed to do?
Right, so we would plan to start construction within the next couple of weeks on the location. As far as in-service date would depend on contract availability, materials, time, and delivery. I would say that the station and all of the components associated with it could be installed within about 90 days from start to finish.
So before winter.
Out here. Okay. Nothing now?
Nope.
The public hearing was held at the planning commission 2 weeks ago. And typically we don't, often take comment past that. However, in something like this, I guess I would ask council members if you were comfortable taking additional comment from residents who are here. My only ask would be is that it's new information, not stuff that was brought up at the council at the public hearing before, or any of the questions that were addressed in emails back and forth. But if you had some new information or questions, we'd be happy to take those questions. I think actually, why don't you guys have a seat?
Sure.
And we'll invite any residents that would like to make comment or questions to step to the podium at this moment. Then we'll probably grab you guys back up to, once we have some questions, we'll get some answers, all right? So this time, you guys comfortable with that?
Yeah.
If there's anybody that wants to speak or has anything, other statements that they'd like to make regarding this conditional use permit, I just ask that you step to the podium, state your name and address, and we'll take your comments.
Hi, I'm
Sure.
Paul Burke, and I live on 196th Street East. I find it startling that Northern Natural Gas, who's done these types of projects so often, has no idea really that their customer, CenterPoint Energy, will be putting mercaptan odorant into the gas at this site, because it is the common thing that's done. I find it kind of disingenuous. And that has kind of been the hallmark of this whole project, where they do the absolute, they kind of quote, hide behind the obligation only to comply with federal regulation with no sense of impact on community. I think that's all I had to add tonight.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else?
While she's writing that down, David and Christine Clemens were at 19425 Foxfield Drive. Our property is directly across Texas from the proposed location. We did attend the planning commission meeting and expressed, or really had questions to try to find out more about the project because so little was available prior to that meeting. So Chris has prepared some questions and I'll have her kind of walk through what she has researched.
Okay, good evening. Okay, so first question, the metal buildings, when we were at the planning commission, we believe Stephen Martinez had said it's going to be blue steel. The plan calls for more earth tone colors that might blend in better with the landscape. So we're wondering what it is. It still was not addressed in the questions that we had asked of LNG. So
Okay.
I'd like to know that. All existing substations that we run around looking at that LNG has provided are a fraction of the size. They are small. They are not located between two neighborhoods. So our request is, I guess we urge you to find an alternate site. If you haven't been in Gray Fox or South Fork, it's two hills that come together, and this
substation is gonna be at the bottom of the hill, and there are no trees that will ever screen this from where we sit. We are gonna look at this for decades. The noise levels we're also very concerned about, and we're really concerned about the health and well-being of our family and any odors, gas, chemicals, toxins that are gonna be emitted, because that's only gonna go up. And it's gonna end up in everybody's homes through the air exchangers. So we want to know, are there any toxins, chemicals? That answer still has not been answered, or that question has still not been answered. The new tree plan that's up is not what was submitted at the planning commission meeting. There were only 12 trees on the west side. So I was wondering, is this truly how many trees are going to be planted to screen it? And I actually had brought up the American larch trees. They do drop their needles and they look like they're dead for half of the year. And the Black Hill spruce, we have them in our yard and they grow. We've been there 9 years. They've probably grown maybe 2 to 3 feet. So I guess for the neighbors that are lower, a taller tree is going to help them. That's faster growing. It won't help anyone that's on the hill. Olive Gray Fox that overlooks this, the trees won't help. The other thing is the noise. I know you brought it up. And the guidelines are basically for 40 minutes of every hour are the guidelines for Minnesota. And are we going to hear noise from this for 40 minutes of every hour, 24 hours a day? Since those are the guidelines. And I was looking at, a vacuum is like 50, and this is going to be louder than that. And sound travels out in the country.
It's allowed to be louder. The guidelines
Yeah.
allow up to 60 decibels.
65.
65,
Yeah.
which is louder than vacuum. So if they're saying it's the volume of a conversation, how many minutes out of every hour is this thing making noise? And if it's operational for 16 hours, is it making noise the entire time? Or is it making noise for 10 minutes out of every hour? That's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Because if they're allowed to be up to the guideline, then it can be as loud as a vacuum cleaner for 40 minutes out of every hour. And that will be the guideline.
And then I guess what is the guidelines for approving second driveways in the city of Credit River? I know the neighboring property applied for one and they were not approved. And I guess how is this any different other than it's a natural gas company that's requesting the driveway? Like, how do you treat those properties differently? What are those guidelines? And the same with the septic. I believe that this is being built over the property owner's alternate septic site. And when we were purchasing our land, we were told we cannot disturb that alternate septic site in any form at any time. And how is this property different than our property or any other property that's out there with a septic site? And I guess we moved out here for the peace and tranquility and the views of nature, and this is going to all change if this goes in. This is our view. Our house is directly overlooks this site, and it's almost an acre in size. It's 200 by 200, and it's just short of an acre, and that is a very large substation. All of the other substations that we have driven to are not even close to the size of this. And I just think it needs to be in an undeveloped area where in the future, when it's developed, people can decide if they want to look at it, if they want to hear it, and if they want to expose themselves to any toxins, chemicals, fumes, odors that are emitted. We had no idea this was going in when we built our home 9 years ago. No idea. And we would not have purchased this lot had we known that there was a chance this could go in. We passed up on so many lots based on this could potentially happen, this could potentially happen. We chose this one knowing that there was nothing going in, there were no plans.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your time.
Thank you. That was very thoughtful and well put together.
Thank you.
Cindy, septic.
Yeah.
Somebody have their microphone on? For speaker?
think it's
You can mute your Zoom.
That should be better. I checked twice with the County Environmental Services and the plans to them, and they have said that there is no issue. There is no subject.
Okay. So driveway, secondary driveway, we. Other than one. Have never issued a variance for a second driveway.
Well, and have we ever issued a second driveway on a CUP? It's usually the landowner that applies for a second driveway, right? Have we ever done this before?
No, not since you have adopted your driveway. The driveway ordinance does allow for one driveway proposal, but it does allow for a property owner or someone else to be able to petition the town board for a second driveway. And those from the city council and rail granted it. You give once. I don't remember exactly the
Was a special needs person that lived at the address.
And so you typically have not granted it, but typically the reason for the second driveway request to the town board, now city council, was that somebody wanted a U-shaped driveway or somebody wanted it for their, to make it easier to get to their accessory structure, something like that. The difference here would be that this is something that you in your zoning ordinances deem to be an essential service. This is utilities that people need to heat their homes and so forth. There is no, in your ordinance, there's no standards that you apply. It's basically in your discretion. And that was the way it was. And historically, I would agree, you've only done it once. Since that's all it costs.
Right. Right. Mr. Lawrence.
So Bob, if we denied this, if we said no second driveway, what would be the ramifications on the city and the city council by the applicant? What would happen?
Well, if you said no to the driveway,
Mhm.
what would in a sense be something that would be kind of negating their use of the property for a conditional use permit, because they wouldn't have access to it.
Right.
Unless there was a way somehow, I don't know the site, to get access from the existing driveway to that property. And I don't know the topography of that, but that would be another alternative, to try and do that, which would get them access.
Another alternative to replat this of two lots so that the new lot would have.
And that would-
Driveway.
Then under your ordinance, they would have an automatic access to that. Municipal law requiring you to have that driveway.
Right.
Yes.
And we typically would because it's a parcel of record.
And there you get access to the property.
Mhm.
So, so that would be a requirement and it'd be consistent with your ordinance.
Right.
So if I was Northern Natural Gas and I was looking for a location for this, and I've had a little bit of experience with utilities looking for substations, a little bit. Wouldn't it be prudent of them to look ahead of time and say, before we do this entire plan, and we have the agreement with the property owner, for them to find out, could they even get a driveway into this? Wouldn't you think they would have looked at that, contacted us and said, is this even a possibility? No,
It's a hypothetical to me.
yeah,
I would say most people, if they were aware of that condition, a lot of people would.
Yeah.
Ask, but not necessarily. And they are asking.
Yep.
They have gone through the process, they have asked for it. And it's now before you. They've held a public hearing. This is not a technical variance. The driveway ordinance is not part of your zoning ordinance, so therefore, you know, although for generic purposes, we've been calling it a variance, but in a sense, it's a discretion on your part whether you grant the driveway. To answer your first question about what happens and if you decide in your discretion not to grant it, my guess would be that we would be facing a lawsuit from the natural gas, saying that this is something that we are acting arbitrary and capricious, is usually the term the court is using that. It's a very generic term, but we would have to have valid, solid reasons why we were denying their request for the project.
Well, in 14 years sitting at this table, I would guess we have denied a second driveway on a property at least once a year, Al? Maybe more than that. And it's sometimes hard to explain. We've had some people that have been very, very disappointed, saying, why me? But that has been a rule we have had here as long as I can remember. And I think for the people that have been in Credit River a long time, remember that. I guess I just don't understand why we would change a rule that our landowners, our property owners, our taxpayers, our citizens have not been able to do and open this up to this commercial concern.
I think that's well said, Brent and Bob and stuff, because hypothetical leading questions do well and direct and cross, right? But not in discussions where you're trying to be neighborly, but we have no other choice but to discuss in this forum. So I think my follow-up to Brent's, to make it less hypothetical but more objective, is when we look at that, a lawsuit is not friendly between neighbors. A knot in my backyard weighs heavy on this, but we all appreciate how well we live, and warm homes and utilities are important. What, to Brent's point, what would be the extenuating circumstances that we'd allow the homeowner the second permit on their driveway that would be the talking points that would be of risk? To Brent's point, let me say it more concisely. I can't think of anything that this homeowner would have come to us with that they wanted to build an acre site with multiple buildings on it that we would have gone, that sounds like a good idea. I think this will be the second permit we grant in 14 years. So where does that sit on kind of the civil grounds of this when we look at this? Is that just because it's Northern Natural Gas that we'd go to extenuating circumstances to put in a driveway? But if the people who live here, who are the most important, wanted to do something for their own benefit on their own land, we'd say no.
And you're asking me,
Yep.
it's hypothetical, and I'll repeat what I said earlier. I think if you deny their request for an access to the driveway, which your ordinance allows you to provide to them, and I understand your reason in saying we historically denied it. The question would be, because we're probably going to get a lawsuit from Northern Natural Gas, and I think how the court would look at it is, were we acting in an arbitrary and capricious manner? In other words, if we have a valid reason for why we were denying that driveway request for an essential service. And I understand that they're not a resident. I understand they're not a voter. I understand historically, but I think that will weigh heavily on a judge's mind in this respect. Somebody who's looking at this will look at this. This isn't somebody for their own convenience. This isn't something that somebody wants because they want it for their own convenience to be able to get their ATVs or their boats or whatever into their storage shed easily. That this is something that your own zoning ordinance, you said, is an essential service. And the court, I think, will look at that. That is the sort of the difference for you guys as to why they may be more likely to be able to obtain a driveway permit versus somebody who just wants it for their own convenience or for the looks of their landscape.
So that's the hard part, right? Because the other option is that Northern Natural Gas has another option. They could have purchased part of this property, subdivided it, and made it a lot of record and automatically been granted So there is, it's not like this driveway is the only option.
And that
For
may
that
be what
piece.
they do. I don't know. One option would be, you know, they would even go find another site. One option would be that they purchase the land and subdivide it, and then they would automatically have a lot of record. You would be able to get a driveway. Third option would be that they sue us. And my concern would be, one, I can't guarantee you any lawsuit, guarantee you success. But the other question would be, if this is now in the court's hands, are we going to get all of the conditions that right now, you know, Cindy, Shane, and I have all worked on with regard to that project? When you go into court like that, I can't guarantee you that the judge is going to look at it and the court may grant it without condition. Court may look at it differently than you guys. And so those are all factors that you need to weigh. Because ultimately, if you don't make the decision here, you know, with regard to what Cindy has in the brick or stucco or something, the things that you talked about here, you may leave it in the hands of a district court judge who may not see it as you. And that's always the risk whenever you go into.
This would be
You get sued, you do have insurance through the Minnesota,
League.
the league now. Almost had to think about it. But it is something that you've asked sort of a hypothetical. Those are sort of the three options of us.
And it's district. Even though they have federal regulation there, it would be a district court matter.
It typically, I don't know, because I don't know all the facts. If you go through the venue, to be able to tell you whether this is something, if you have diversity where it's somebody from Wisconsin and somebody, then they can go in under diversity rules, they can go into federal court. If it's a federal question, which I think is this, then that could be put into federal court. I just don't know the ins and outs of this. I know. I haven't, other than answering questions from Cindy and stuff, I haven't studied this.
This is an out of scope question, but I have to ask it because I need clarification on it. Did we or did we not hear in some of the processes and conversations on this? Is this the station that may have been proposed out further on Texas, not in the residential area, and the county came back and said, we don't really want that there? Or was that there's been two things going on in parallel here that I can't recall. Does anybody else?
No, I think you're thinking about the center point.
That was the center.
Center point line that's going to connect to this one.
Okay.
And they didn't want it there because they didn't want a driveway on
the county road.
the county road.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to make sure.
It's all about driveways.
Yes.
Yeah,
That was.
well, and that's the problem is we've had Center Point and Northern Natural Gas and we're doing things in parallel here. I just want to make sure I was clear on that.
So let's back up. I want to invite the representatives from Northern Natural Gas, and let's answer the rest of those questions. Can we finish answering her questions first? I want to make sure we don't miss any. Well, if it's the same question, then
We've already answered.
tell me what's the question really quick. Well, if it's similar, it could be answered in the same answer.
The question that I had was the site and what they're going to do to not be so intrusive. I think they were talking about they're gonna be looking at it. I'm right across the street. I am one of the homeowners who denied the second driveway. And we have requested that Northern National put a row of trees on our property, so we don't have to look at it. And they respectfully declined because they didn't think it would bother us. Well, when I'm out gardening, I can see it. I don't know how they know what would bother me or not.
How about this? Your comments are very important. I'm gonna back up the mayor in this, is that if we're gonna have a lot of people with comments and questions that have been left unanswered, it makes more sense just logistically and to keep it straight is to allow them to answer them in a stepwise fashion. So would you mind actually officially putting yourself on the record and actually making your comments after they're done?
Okay, let's start with building. We talked briefly about that before and the potential to look at a different kind of finish to the outside of the building. The question was, is that at the planning commission, the statement was made that the color of the building was going to be blue. The plans do suggest an earth tone. Please help us with the confusion over the color of the building.
Yep, so our normal colors are northern blue, but we have adjusted this to conform to an earth tone color. In addition to, we've agreed to expand beyond that as a collaborative effort to soften this, to look at some other faux sidings that could possibly go onto the buildings. But it would be an earth tone color.
Okay. The question was asked is what kind of chemicals or any kind of discharges or anything like that are potentials? And this might be a question for the engineer. What can you tell us about that?
The only discharge that would ever happen would be methane during maintenance. There'd be, because we'd have to clear out sections of the pipe during maintenance. That would be a very occasional thing. It's not a regular thing that happens. And it's a very minimal amount of gas that'd be flushed into the atmosphere, just to make it safe to maintain and operate on for our maintenance crew. But outside of that, there'd be no gas or chemicals or any hazardous material released.
Okay, and in this release of methane, what would you expect with the release of methane? Is there order to that? Is there, how far would this disperse? Like, hey, would anybody notice anything with that kind of?
With any release, it'd be very unnoticeable. We flush it out in different sections if it was gonna be a large release, but it would never be a large release or it'd be hazardous. That's something we care about a lot, it's safety of the public, so it'd be very minimal, completely unnoticeable, completely unhazardous, just for the safety of our people.
And what kind of interval? You say it doesn't happen very often. What would cause that type of maintenance to, and how often does that type of maintenance happen?
Any repairs may require some gas to be flushed, but that's just a case by case basis. It's if a part is failing, we're gonna replace it so it doesn't have any major failures.
So in your experience, how often a site like this would have repairs done that would require some?
You do
flushing
pretty
like that?
annual or pretty frequent maintenance. I wouldn't say I have the experience to know how often that happens from an operations standpoint.
Okay,
Is it just a question for the engineer? Considering that the homeowners are concerned about how low lying a site this is and the aerodynamics here of gas and mercaptan, is that then a concern for this proposed site with the release as compared to one that may be on higher ground and have different windage? For the lingering event, like that, if we're not sure how often it's going to be serviced, then what's going to be released, since it's not definite. Can you speak to at least the definite of the site and where that comes into the engineering, and that it's low lying ground, now it's in a residential area? Is that going to cause lingering effects of smells and odors and gases?
There wouldn't be enough gas flush to ever cause any lingering smells or damage or anything like that. It'd be very minimal release. I guess I understand your question. That doesn't answer it really.
Well, I thought I asked clearly. Did I not there?
Well, you were saying that
If you
because
fart in a
this is a
car with-
low area.
If you fart in a car with closed windows and you're down in a hole, it smells bad.
Yeah.
So you got a site in a neighborhood with hills all around it that you're gonna be releasing gas. Is that a concern that as a homeowner or a neighbor, I need to be worried about, or anything, that if we don't know how often it's gonna happen? Is this site gonna be concerning? That has it been considered in the engineering plan that it's in a low-lying site, that it is abutting residential neighborhoods, and that whatever gas or mercaptan or anything that needs to be released in normal service or in downtime, is that going to cause the people who are sitting here to smell something they don't want to, like they're locked in a car with somebody?
It would never be a concern. The
Okay.
amount would be- that'd be a concern.
Back to the noise. The question is how often and at what kind of intervals would sound near the edge of the Minnesota allowed decibels be?
I would say outside of my previous knowledge, we just have to wait for that noise study. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't have that experience to know what the noise levels are like personally, but it is under requirements. Like we said, talking level is kind of a general note we've given for it. But if we get that noise study, we can get you guys some concrete data on that.
I guess it sounds like a noise study would be so important to this in a residential area. And I'll just share, like, as a farm kid, like an idling diesel truck, not a semi, just a grain truck is like 65, 70 decibels. And if you leave it idling outside, even at my house, the school bus sits there, you hear it. And that it's just like, if I had to live next to this and that this thing was going to be idling 40 minutes out of every hour of the day, that's just so important to the people that live there. And the question of why this proposed site in a residential neighborhood. I just, that seems to be something that we can all visualize the buildings. We can all visualize what we want this the best to look like to make it a compromise. Nobody knows what it's going to sound like and what it's going to smell like until it's there, and then it's too late. And I think that that's a concern of a lot of the homeowners, and that'd be a concern of mine if I live next door to this.
Mhm. Did we catch them all? Did we get all these questions?
I'll ask Chris at the list. Did we get all your check boxes done?
The other thing, I want to mention on the answers question or noise, it said we are investigating condition specific this location after going through all the Minnesota guidelines. What does that mean? Is that just the noise study, or is that something?
Yeah,
If you
so
mind.
that's the noise study. So we would investigate the conditions as to what this location would have. And I believe, it's written as a condition of the CP, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so we've addressed that also, and your council has addressed that as part of the conditions. That we would be at those levels, and we will provide modeling to that. As to when that's available, I don't have a date yet, but we are currently investigating what those conditions would be particularly imposed for this location.
Okay.
I can say, I live there 9 years, there isn't a constant traffic going through there, there will be constant noise, it's very peaceful. Other than maybe a rush hour, but that's not even bad. As far as the noise level, so if it compares to a constant noise level, that's going to be a lot for the homeowners. It's going to be constant hard.
Yeah, we don't expect this to be atrocious as it's sounding to the community. We have provided vegetational screening, which would provide additional noise mitigations to it to keep the noise inside the station. In addition to that, that's full-grown vegetation. We provided, significant screening for this location that's not required under the CUP to address some of these concerns. So you would have that. So even if the noise inside the ambient noise with the running station at an optimal level, reaching its high peak, probably outside the station with the tree vegetational screenings, you're not going to have that much of an impact. These are in other neighborhoods, very minimal operational noise that you're going to hear, not more than a conversation happening in the backyard.
Okay.
And looking at that, that's very different.
It is, yes, ma'am.
Correct.
It's a different because we had to change the vegetational screening for 2 reasons. One, because the line of sight 30 degree. And in addition to that, we provided additional screening because of some feedback that we heard from the previous meeting.
The screening is quite a distance. I mean, where does the noise come out of? The buildings, that height? Where specifically does noise?
I would say the most common point that noise would originate from would be the control valves, which would be inside of one of those buildings. There may be very minimal noise from gas flowing in the pipe, but that would be a very, most of it would be from the pressure change in those regulators that's inside.
But that's the case, those trees are on that side and this side are significant distance away to contain that noise. And if you have noise in a small area, it's gonna contain itself. If you've got noise coming from here and there's a screening 120 feet away, that's not gonna contain.
Yeah, I understand. We've tried to adequately address all of the concerns that you all had in regards to noise. To reach the optimal point at this time, the vegetational screening provides, I think, it actually exceeds what's required.
Okay, I think we've answered those questions. Let's see if we have any other questions from residents.
Sure, thank you.
My name is Denise Hammer and I live right across the street from the proposed site. And it's just maybe an addition. We talked about screening and fencing. Will there be a privacy screen added to this? On top of the fence, the one on, I believe it's on Mushtown, they just added some screen mesh to that. That would not only, I think, cut down on some of the noise, but also add some more privacy. And I know that Northern Natural Gas just installed some of that recently in that residential site. Because it, you know, the neighbors were seeing the screen or the fence. And so we would like to entertain that, to add it's similar to what you see on the pickleball courts. It's actual screen that they tie onto the fence. And I know that we had requested that we get some trees because I can see it just like they will. And we had requested from Northern Natural Gas if they could pay for the trees. We plant them, we do the watering to take away what, in his words, is being somewhat intrusive to our neighborhood. And I know I voiced this, that, you know, we're a new city. What we do here is going to set a precedent. What do we want this to look like for our city of Credit River? We just want to, yep, it's the big utility. We have to play by their rules and we have no choice. But this is a new city. There's been a lot of good press about this, about the city and what we do here going forward. This is your city. This is our city. And if that's how we're going to operate, then that's what's going to be on our reputations, if you will. So again, I would like to request that the mesh be put on and some additional trees for our property, which, except for you, that you're going to be looking at it. I feel for you. Ours is the most impacted because every time I come out of that driveway, every time I go over and garden, I'm going to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other residents that have any other, something new? Just comment, question?
Okay, my name is Matt Loge. I live at 19455 Foxville Drive, right across the street from Texas. Just looking at the plans, seems like there's a lot of open space for there ever be future expansion for this. To make it more, I mean, put more stuff on there. I don't know if that's been addressed with anybody yet, but concerned about that. Also, just, you know, reiterate, I'm kind of new to that. I wasn't able to go to the first meeting. This all happened really, really quickly for my taste. So we're just kind of wondering how that process went through and why did it happen so quickly? I'm sure you addressed all this before, but I just want to add my voice to that list. But my main question is, I'd be concerned about future expansion, making this into a much larger project because you have a lot of open space there, and wondering if that's something that would be in the works or if that has happened in the past. That's probably about all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any other residents? Then we'll double back to some of these. Okay, let's back up a little bit. There's two things hanging there. And I don't know if it's something Northern Natural Gas can answer. I do want to ask staff expansion, or where are we as far as setbacks and stuff from this? Or is there really room to get any bigger than this? So that right now they have a 200-foot by 200-foot easement. Looking at the numbers in the plans, it looks like they're using up all of that. They're how far away from the road? Looks like what, 43 feet from the road? Is that 33 and 10? Yeah. So there's probably no room to get any closer to the road than that.
So it would have to be cut back just like any other structure, current, what they're showing currently does. There may be room for some expansion. The way that the conditions are worded in the draft CUP that you have before you tonight, it would need to develop in conformance with this site plan that you're considering. If they wanted to do something different, they'd have to come back in.
Okay,
And for an amendment.
okay. The only other question was about additional fence screening,
Slatting.
the netting
Sliding
and
and
mesh on the
mesh.
fence. Looks like in the current plan drawn, that's pretty well covered in trees other than the gate. That might be reasonable for the gate.
You gotta be able to get in.
Right. Mhm. So no other questions from the residents? Any other questions from council, of staff, of Northern Natural Gas?
I guess I just have one, is maybe for Steve, is in the 2 or 3 years of planning, what are or what were the other proposed sites?
Yeah, so we addressed those in the opening. The other proposed sites were directly on top of the pipe, which we weren't able to do because of wetland concerns. And then we moved down each lot until we got to this one with the approval. So those were the proposed sites for this project.
Okay, so nothing outside of this neighborhood was considered.
No. You have to also consider that just where we are at and then where the customer needs to come into is a considerable consideration. So there's a cost for both of those. And so you have to look at that as where do they currently have distribution lines running through, and can they get to this in a reasonable manner without, disrupting a lot of other things. And so those were some of the factors that were used in considering the location.
So Center Point's running their line right down 27.
No.
So
Yeah.
actually,
I just wanted to ask, just another to that measure, the slatting. Have you done that at your other sites?
There's some locations that have them. We wouldn't recommend either of the two applications because of maintenance and ongoing issues that the city would have as far as issuing violations to us, because they are problematic, especially with the wind. Slatting, usually kids can go and pull those out very easily. Becomes a problem for slatting. For the meshing, it's also a problem because it blows down easily. So it would be a continuous issue with folks having to call in. I think what we propose now with the black fencing kind of blends in very well with the community, gives a softer approach to it.
So how much further north could this have gone?
Further north.
Yeah.
We didn't
Closer to the
consider
pipeline?
locations north.
you mean closer to the pipeline, Brent?
Well, yeah, I mean, well, it has to be close to the pipeline, but also has to be close to where Center Point is having their lines, right?
Yeah, I couldn't speak to where Center Point's distribution is. I don't have access to their facility information, but I could tell you that we did investigate all of the immediate area around, and the proposals because of wetland concerns directly over the pipe. Across the street on the west side of Texas Avenue was also investigated as a location, but because of wetland concerns, we couldn't use those. So we had to move back over to the highest ground that we could find in the area that would be most suitable for the pipeline construction project and installation of the town border station.
And you had property owners to the north of this that said they were not interested in,
We didn't investigate to the north, sir, no.
oh, okay.
If you have comments, now's the time to say them.
I think to clarify Brent's question, if he wanted to know between this site going north up to the line, how many homeowners denied it?
But that's what I was hoping, that's what I was answering, but you had said none, so.
How many homeowners denied the easement between the location now and the pipeline itself?
Yeah.
There was 4 landowners who denied the easement directly on there. If you exclude the one who was affected by the wetland, there were technically 3 who denied the easement to get to the location where it's currently settled.
And they probably wouldn't have gotten a driveway off of 27, because the county would have said no. And
It's possible.
the county supposedly said no to Center Point about their pipeline running down between the cemetery and the park. And Center Point told us, well, we have to go down Murphy because the county wouldn't allow us to have a driveway permit. So I would guess the county wouldn't allow a driveway permit for this as well. On 27. So, you know, we're talking a lot about driveways, but we heard that 2 weeks ago from Center Point.
All right. There are questions? No?
Chris said.
All right, one more.
The Center Point, project that is going on right now, it's all flagged behind us. Does that have anything to do with this project?
No,
Totally separate.
that's all. Yeah, the county is, and I believe they're doing a culvert replacement this week. Mhm. All right. Other questions? Brent, Andrew, Al, comments?
I guess my question going forward is, we can deny on the basis of the driveway, but then we'll probably go to court. And probably,
Does anyone have any more questions for the gentleman standing in?
oh, no,
Yeah,
Thank you.
you can take a seat. Thank you.
so that's one option. We could deny and based on the drive. And we probably end up going to court. And then maybe there wouldn't be any, you know, concessions or conditions or whatever. Or if we tabled this, when do we run out of time, our time constraint on this? Yeah. When does that clock start, or when did it start and when does it stop?
Give me a moment and I will.
Yeah.
look that for you.
So that'd be another option. Or we could approve and go against our rules on the driveway. We just had someone right across the street. They could not have a second driveway. And we could do
Probably
that.
could approve the conditional use permit, but not the driveway.
Yeah, I suppose. we
Then
could
they'd
do
have to
that.
find a different, they'd have to find a different way.
You probably would be, in a sense, if you didn't give them the access, then kind of, that's why CB earlier, I said, you needed to address the driveway first, and then the CDP. You were going to get lost. That would be, either they find another site, they bring a lawsuit, or they decide that they're going to, in a sense, subdivide the property and get another lot of record, which of course then, under Minnesota law and your, they get a driveway.
Right.
To answer your question on the 1599 timeframe, so this was a complete application on June 16th, 2022. We did extend for the additional 60 days that we're allowed to do. So you have to make a decision right now by October 14th, 2022 in your last regular meeting, for that date is October 3rd.
Additionally, does a utility use fit into our zoning district in this area?
Yes, utility uses are a conditional use in all of your zoning districts.
Mhm. So that being the case, what would be grounds for denial that would be acceptable?
If that was the case, then grounds, generally under municipal law, if it's a conditional use permit, you have to grant that conditional use permit unless health, safety, whatever cannot be addressed by the condition. It's not aesthetics and things like that. It's really more health, safety. Times that I've seen it once was where it was like an aquifer or something that wasn't, could not address, you know, and therefore I think that was one of the issues, was the grounds for denial. That was something that we could not come up with like, you know, screening, some sort of noise restrictions, things like that. Under that situation, I think then you would be able to deny. I think if you deny without something like that, under current Minnesota law, the way it's been interpreted by the courts, is that they are going, because this is something that you, as the zoning authority has said, is permitted with conditions, they will most likely override your decision and say that, then again, every time you do something like that, you run the risk that they may not put additional, you know, the conditions that you guys have worked out, staff has worked out, you guys have reviewed, you've considered other possible conditions from the public. Those I cannot guarantee you once a court gets involved. That's my life, is that I never know what's going to happen once somebody files in the district court. Whether that's federal district court or Scott County.
Okay. Well, I need to see the noise study. I just do. We have time to see it.
The difficulty with the noise study is we could theoretically table this and come back with the ambient noise information of what's there today, but until it's constructed, we can't do a noise study of what will be there.
Because the noise isn't there.
Right.
I get, I know about this, but there are other types of these facilities around that people have been making reference to. I'm assuming some of those had noise studies. Would that give you some information as to the type and frequency of the noise? I know this is not exactly apples to apples, but if it's something similar, that's about all you might have available.
That's
compared to a different site.
Yeah, but that's what I'd like to see when I say noise study is, the noise study right now is, yes, I go up there and I park my truck and I roll down the windows. But I want to see what the comparatives are at other sites that are similar in construction and function. I think that does prevent a health, safety, wellness issue to the residents that are around there. That's my feeling on that, that if we have nebulous answers to this, we just have nebulous answers, Bob, to the noise. We have reassurances, but we have no concrete on, this is what this facility does at this cadence with this decibel level that represents this kind of operation. And I think you guys have done excellent work. The residents have asked excellent questions. There always has to be a compromise in any of this. But that's the one piece that I still don't have the information personally. I'm just sharing to understand what the noise impact is in this in the neighborhood.
One question that I was thinking of when I was listening to it is that the one gentleman, the engineer, said that a lot of the noise was going to be focused within the building. Well, buildings can be insulated. And I didn't hear anything about what insulation, there's something in the structure where the majority of this noise is going to be. That I know at the outside part you can't really address, but on the inside of the building, is there, what kind of insulation are you going to propose?
If you step up to the microphone, please.
So I don't have exact specs on this building. That's something we could definitely get for you. And if there isn't insulation, we can look into adding that as another level of protection. The exact specs in this building would, so the actual project engineer for this may have it. He is an Army reservist who is out until next Monday on leave. But we wouldn't have I wouldn't have that information for you now.
So it sounds, a couple of questions that the council may have. that, Hold on with it. One, is there anything that is prohibiting, anything that would interfere with the safety of the, the mechanics within that, or the buildings, that would preclude you from adding some sort of insulation that might absorb any of the noise that's generated within the building? Number two, is there any other noise studies that have been done for any of these other facilities that have been referenced, or in some other place? I mean, whether it's here or in Iowa, I mean, you've got to have something that is going to be similar to that. And could Northern Natural Gas provide that to the city council?
Noise studies are not generally done on town border stations. They're generally done on compressor stations where you will have a large amount of noise. So to answer your question, we don't have data available on a town border station, but we have committed to providing you that information on the before and after, and to address your question about mufflers and so on that could be added if it was necessary, or additional insulation. Those are things that we could do within the building should it not meet the standards that are abided by with the Minnesota MPCA.
Could it be, my question was not if it didn't cater to the PCAs, but could it just be done?
Well, in a
I understand
hypothetical,
your position. No, I don't want to do it unless I am forced to by the terms of this conditional use permit. The question I have is kind of a good answer. Is there anything prohibiting that from an engineering safety thing? Because that sounds like that would possibly deal with a lot of the noise, which is a major concern of the county.
yeah, as long as we're meeting what the FERC standard is, and I'm going to continue to say that only because that's what we're required to say, but as long as we're below that FERC standard, which is the 55 decibels, we would be in compliance. We're not saying we're not willing to do additional measures, but you're asking us to speculate on what the noise could be at a time in which we don't have an actual noise study, to what are we reducing it from and what are we reducing it to? So we wouldn't be able to answer.
Asking you that. That wasn't the call of my question. The call of my question was, is there anything prohibiting the installation of some sort of insulation that no matter what the noise level was, whether it was with 55 decibels, 45, would dampen that noise within the confines of that building?
And I told you that we would be willing to look into it if it didn't meet a certain standard.
And I understand that, but that may not be what the council realized. The question, I guess, is, was there anything that you're aware of from your vast experience in dealing with this that would prohibit something like that? In other words, it's a fire issue, or it's something that might catch fire, or it's something that will interact negatively with any of the equipment in there, or is this just something that might be an extra cost?
No, we don't have any concerns with safety measures within the building, but what we do have concerns is addressing something that's not yet known. So until we knew what we need to reduce it to, because traffic noise will be louder than what the station would be operating at, especially with it being just at a level of just folks talking in the backyard. The traffic noise that would hear when you see the before and after studies, which would be taken during the daytime when high traffic and nighttime when low traffic, you'll see that it's going to be much quieter in the evening, obviously with no traffic. You get more noise from the traffic noise on this road, Texas Avenue specifically, than you would see with the station operating.
Steve, I just want to say something. I don't think you are personally a disingenuous person, but we've talked a lot about trees and fencing, which are pretty easy to talk about. You guys are supposed to be experts in building town substations, and you have given us no actual genuine details on what this is going to sound like, how often it's going to cycle, the cadence of all that. And I know you don't have to, but you should.
We've provided you the most information that's available to us currently.
I know, but that's not an answer, is it?
Yeah, I can understand.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So I mean, like, that's why I ask about this, because it's the simple thing. I'll just use the analogy again. My kids have to get on the bus. I understand the bus has to park somewhere. It has to idle outside my street because Schmidt and Sons need it to be there so the kids can get to school on time. But if that bus had to idle all night long waiting to pick up my kids, that would be a major impact to my house, because I can hear it idling at 6 o'clock in the morning when I'm coming home from a shift trying to fall asleep. These are the people that have to live here. And this is like a very direct question to the people who are supposed to be experts in this area, and we can't get one. That just doesn't sit well with me.
Well, we provided a response to which you're not satisfied with, which is that it's not louder than a conversation in the backyard, but you're not satisfied with that response, and I understand.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yeah.
is there- based on what you are proposing for this site, is there any, how far away is another one of these types of facilities?
I believe the closest one would be on, it's in Prior Lake.
Mushtown Road.
I'm not familiar with the exact location to what's proposed here. That's going to be the next closest one is on Panama Avenue. Very similar to this location. Yes, ma'am, it is. Very similar. That actually is larger. There's less buildings at the location, but the footprint itself, the way that this is proposed, we're actually, if you look at it, we're only using 168 by 168 because in that 200 by 200, those trees are placed. So the overall actual operational footprint within that is 168 by 168
And is that fully constructed?
with the station here.
You know, is that, if I wanted to go over and look at that or listen to it.
Yes,
and
correct.
observe
Yep.
it, that would be constructed. And
There's a
that's what-
significant amount of traffic at that location, but yes. That station, it doesn't have vegetational screening that this station will have. The station is open in the front. There's no vegetational screening in the front. It is actually built all the way out to the fence line. There's no setbacks for trees. So when you're looking at the overall perspective, while it is a 200 by 200, we're operating within that 168 by 168.
And so there would be potentially ambient noise from that facility. You know, but if that was the one that we did a study on now to get an idea of what the noise was at, that, and this one arguably would be even less because you're having fencing and trees and extra buildings. So
We are, not to interrupt you, but we already are taking ambient noise from the location will be provided as part of what we provide to Cindy, so long as we're meeting those requirements.
I'm sorry, did you do a noise study for that? What was the other?
We did not do a noise study there, but we will
No,
be
but I'm
taking
saying-
ambient noise sounds from there this week so that we could provide you a modeling as to what the station will be like.
But I guess my question is, would we be able within the next month here, because time is of the essence, our time for making a decision is expiring, as you heard from Ms. Nash. Could we do an ambient noise study on that constructed facility that is not apples to apples with this one, but it's similar? So we could get an idea, and then maybe, and then we could work with you as staff to address any of these issues, or be able to come back as to the council and any residents that they happen to be in, and say, look, this is the noise study. This is not even as much screening as we are going to have. This is, it doesn't have the trees, it doesn't have the fence, and this was that noise, and that was this level. We believe ours is going to be less, and we could also maybe address some of this through some sort of insulation within the building.
So long as it doesn't delay our project, we wouldn't have any issues with that. Like I said, we are going to be getting that information this week yet for the other station's location. And we could provide that if you.
I mean, that may answer the question.
I mean,
It's the best we can do.
that's a reasonable answer. Thank you. That you're
Right,
gonna
but as
do
long
what-
as it doesn't provide a delay to us, which we're planning to start immediately, then we would be on board with that.
Well, this isn't quid pro quo here. I mean, it can't be, we're gonna give you the information next week, but we're gonna break ground this week if you want us
There's
to make a
condition
decision,
in
right?
Your CUP that you're issuing to us that we have to meet those standards, though.
I know,
You're already addressing those.
but that's back to my question is, you are answering your question that you're asking correctly. It's gonna meet the standards, but it doesn't answer the question of what does this thing actually sound like every minute of every hour, every day for the people who have to live there. And that's what the sound study does answer, right? It's gonna be a microphone that's gonna tell you how often and how long and at what decibel. What can you expect as you're trying to sleep across the street from this thing? That's what that's gonna answer. That's a really reasonable answer for something you're gonna build in a neighborhood with houses on every side of this. That is, you don't have to agree for whatever reason, but I'm gonna agree for you. That's really reasonable.
So. Mayor. Thinking, well, we've been talking, how about an additional condition like this? Following the commencement of operation. Open and running, okay, you guys are proving it, it's running. If the city council determines that there are noises created from within a building that are audible from 196th Street, that means the road right of way, beyond all the trees and the fencing, the buildings and so forth. Applicant shall install insulation or other mitigated measures to reduce the noise to a level that is not audible. So they don't have to automatically put some sort of insulation within the buildings. This wouldn't be around the outside mechanicals there, but in the buildings.
Where the noise.
If there was
sounds like it's
noise
supposed
that
to
was
be.
audible from the street, then maybe that would be the trigger for putting in some
Additional insulation.
additional insulation.
Would we also want to say, Texas Avenue 27, because this is in a corner? So besides 196, so.
Closer to 196.
Well, we're
Closer,
also,
if you could hear it from under 90, because that is.
And that's the area where there's no vegetation either, and it would be safer for somebody who aren't sitting there.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
There would need to be some slight changes to your wording,
We
but
work out that with
Yeah.
you. But this is just. Well. I think the oral motion could allow.
Attorney review.
Subject to
Subject to
attorney
attorney
Yeah.
review.
And then whatever we. I'm taking so well trained, but
Like
that
we've
would
done
give
this
some
before.
flexibility to modify this. If there was some sort of a specific issue.
yep, there would be some minor changes we'd want to make, but we would be open and agreeable to that so long as we're able to make modifications.
Mark,
And the
you,
other condition that we've been working on, that the building shall be clad in a full brick or other finish not later than September 1st, 2023. It'd be time to construct, and you want to make sure it can be done over a summer period, unless otherwise agreed to in writing by the council. So if there was a problem with getting materials, stuff, which a lot of them has had, prior to installation, the proposed siding material shall be submitted to the city for review and approval by the city council.
Could the city planner make those revisions so it doesn't have to come back to a formal meeting? You guys could consult with that. We would want to change it to that so that we didn't have any delays in the approval process, along with the extension period to come back to the planner.
That would be up to the council. You should be able to yes.
It does. If they're agreeing to do something other than the metal shedding siding,
well, so the question is, again.
whether or not the finish of the exterior needs to come back to council for decision, or if that's a staff.
It would be
approval.
delegated to staff. It'd be delegated, and what they're requesting is it be delegated to Cindy Nash to be able to, who does this for other communities and stuff, be able to look at that, make a determination. What their concern is that you guys only meet every 2 weeks, and if this is something that has to be done, they don't want to delay the project. If at all possible.
does that allow input of the people who have to look at it to collaborate with Cindy if we do it that way to say, I know.
No, I don't want to write that in. 'Cause
I don't
somebody won't
either.
Agree, I have a problem.
Wait,
with
Bob, I didn't say write it in. I'm asking though, if Cindy's the one that's making the decision, does that even allow her input from people who have to look at it?
To the extent that city wants to allow that, whoever's making the decision, whether that be delegated to an individual council member, the mayor, or city administrator, myself, somebody, what they're saying is, instead of waiting for a formal body, for you guys all to meet in a forum to make that decision, can somebody be delegated with that task to look at what they're proposing? And
We
make
delegate that
decision?
to staff and myself.
Be okay with that. I mean, that
I'd be
allows.
okay with that. I'd be okay with staff and the mayor.
The mayor's easy to find, his address is.
You know how, we know where he lives. So that
Before
was-
further, Mark tried to
I know, I was
speak
gonna
twice
get
and I
back to
wanted to
that.
hear his comments.
But, most of us looking for clarification as to your question regarding the need to establish a baseline, sound study on that. It sounds like that can be done. Obviously, we can't deny something based on what's out there now. If you will, my experience has been with sound studies that you're gonna get a lot of ambient noise, dogs barking, and get traffic, and get jets flying overhead and things like that, which might get that. The MPCA standard says some like, you can go up to 10% of the time, which I think is what Chris was talking about earlier, which may not have anything to do with what the operation of gas means might be. But if, as the city attorney has suggested, you allow staff and the mayor to add some conditions to the best of our ability. And it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be different than what's there now. But at least that would be something that would be, should be acceptable in the eyes of the court, should it have gone that way otherwise.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I mean, it addresses my concerns and if they were not well worded, that was it, is the ambient noise of the area is important as a baseline, but I've been trying to ask questions over and over again. Tell us what the actual noise of this thing is. Like if you actually had to build this next door to your house, what are you going to be hearing? And that's what I would hope, that if we could get a sound study or sample from this other substation, then at least we'd have a point of reference so that the unknown of every time I try to lay my head down to bed, do I hear a noise that I didn't hear that I cannot stand the rest of my life as a resident here?
Which to the point of the suggested,
Other site that's similar and
or on top of that, suggested that if there is unacceptable noise, that
there'd
further
have to be a
insulation
plan,
would be
there'd have
required.
to be a plan to make it right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what the suggested.
Yes,
condition-
that's, I was just agreeing with Mark. It's addressed, I think, all my points.
Okay,
So if we have a condition that we work out with. we're
on the
gonna have to look at
terminology.
Final wording, make sure it's all good, that if there is some sort of ambient noise level discernible from 196th Street, then at that point in time, they would have to put in additional insulation or other mitigated measures within the structures.
It shouldn't be just limited to the structures, and I'm not trying to give us more work to do, but there are other things we can do, like if there's noise coming from the pipes, there's pipe linkage that we can install. There's insulation measures that can be taken, but until those factors are known, we can't really address them.
Well, I think we're addressing that in this type of condition, saying that if there is, that those types of mitigating measures will be taken care of.
Sure. So if you can hear it from the, you get operational, you can hear this from the street, 196th Street, then, and we probably have everybody out to hear it, and, if that's the case, we kind of identify that, we invite you guys out, everybody hears it, then you guys would have an obligation to take mitigated measures.
And what time period are you putting on for those mitigations? Because there are issues with material availability to procure those items, so if it's 90 days, it won't work.
Well, I'm looking over Cindy's shoulder.
Sure.
As she's typing this out. Is that the mitigated measure shall be installed within 6 months of written notice by the.
Yeah, that would be acceptable.
Seems reasonable.
So it wouldn't be forever, but it would be, the people would be okay to put some up with some noise if they know it's gonna be good.
Sure.
And then, and I'm gonna request, when you approve this, that all of this be.
Contingent upon attorney review.
And then when we get this, when I say this is the best we can do, then anything, and again, there's always anything that's substantive change, it has to come back. We have until October to do this. But if it is a minor change, it's wordsmithing, this does not come back.
Okay, anything else?
I don't know how we can do any better on this. I mean, there has to be negotiation on both sides. I saw the Burks leave, but I thought his note this afternoon saying that, you know, asking two things, and I thought that was very well thought out, but if we can take care of it, I just don't want to go to court because we won't win.
I don't know that you won't win. I just
That's not
think
a very-
that it's- I just think it would be, I think of it from a district court judge. He's gonna look at this as essential infrastructure. You have named this essential, you let it allowed in every district. And therefore, this is something that people need to heat their homes and, you know, it's got some negatives, I understand that, but it also has some positives. And how would a judge? Do it? That's what I have. If you've asked me publicly this question, and I'll answer it. If you wanted to get into pros and cons and chances of winning, then, you know, it'd have to be a threat of a lawsuit, and then I go into closed session, and then we'll go, yeah, then we really go. But yes, I could see a scenario in this where a judge may decide that this is something that you guys had really no reason, you know, to deny. And then in that situation, they always use this language, you were arbitrary completions. You didn't have a valid reason to deny the driveway or for this permit, therefore, I'm gonna overrule and I'll substitute my judgment for yours.
Well,
So I have shared my screen. so you
Yep.
guys can see what I have.
the conditions.
Mayor, does the council have any other reason for the gentleman to say before?
Do you guys have any other questions for them? You guys can proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you guys are comfortable with that, as much as you can be.
Comfortable isn't the right term.
Understand.
I feel for you guys, because if this was coming in across the street, I would have asked the same questions, pushed just as hard. I don't like it. I don't like it that we're approving a driveway for a large corporation and that we wouldn't do it for a homeowner. That doesn't sit well with me at all. And I think that probably needs to be looked at going forward, so that's on us. But we've heard our attorney and I've tried to do everything I can to make sure this isn't as painful as it can be. But I don't know if we can do the lawsuit. Like, there's definite things where you fight to the end. And this is one of those ones where hearing Bob talk is, I think we're gonna trip over our own feet trying to do that. And we're gonna end up maybe with not the compromises we've even got to hear. So I just gotta weigh that while I think about what I'm gonna do. It's crap. I'm sorry. That's a crap answer. I know it is, honestly, but it's my honest feelings on the inside. And I know it's not what you want to hear.
Well, the decision is before us. Deny, table, or approve with the recommended conditions.
Well, maybe the first thing we should do is see if we can pass the driveway.
Well,
But I agree, if we are granting a second driveway on that, because this won't have an address, right? This,
It would have an address, so, we address multiple other extra things for the purposes of. And when one.
emergency response.
As an example, like a HOA might have an entrance monument that's lit up and there's electricity coming there, they need an address, so we do sign
Mhm.
addresses.
well, we're gonna have to revisit our second driveway policy, because we just blew that if we do this. And maybe we need to do that. Anyway. But well, I suppose somebody has to make a motion
One way or
to
another.
do the second driveway and see if it passes. Right? So
How it
I'll make
starts.
the motion to approve the second driveway on the subject property.
Okay, thank you, Brent. We have a motion to approve the variance for a second driveway to this utility facility. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
The second by Councilmember Novak. Motion is second to approve the second driveway. All in favor, say aye.
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 I'm gonna make
Anybody
history.
opposed?
I'm gonna dissent.
Motion passes 3-1.
Against, yeah.
Guess that means you're not making the motion to approve the conditional use permit then.
Actually, I think we've done everything right for the site. I just can't look these guys in the eyes and know that a gas company could build 2 driveways across the street, but I can't build them 2 on mine. That's on us. It's on me. So
Okay, conditional
I
use
do
permit.
think we need to put on the agenda, maybe in a workshop session, that we've got to look over this second driveway thing, because if we did this and we're denying it for our residents, then maybe we need to revisit it.
I agree with you 100% on that.
And doesn't mean that you could have your whole property driveway, although it'd be, some people would like that, but we have to. So Mark, at some point, I think we need to bring that forward and have a discussion. So,
That sounds like something for the planning commission.
yeah,
I agree with Brent. I think this is a good light bulb moment to look at this. I think our neighbors in Spring Lake, did they recently look at this too? There might be some rural lessons learned here.
Okay, conditional use permit. Deny, table, or approve.
And if it is going to be approved, there is such a motion. From the council would be a motion approving the conditional use permit for essential service station for Northern Natural Gas, subject to the 2
Two added
additional
conditions.
conditions relating to ambient noise and architectural standards. Subject to attorney review of this final conditions. And I also would add into that, Mr. Mayor, that Northern Natural Gas would be responsible for reimbursing the city for all of its costs incurred by town or the city and staff as part of that motion.
Okay.
well, very well said, and I might as well do it. So I will make that motion using the wording that the city attorney has given and with all of the details that were contained in how he said the motion should be stated. I would not be able to repeat it verbatim.
I understand.
Somebody's got to do it.
Okay, Brent, motion to approve, given the wording conditions. Do I have a second?
I'll
A second by Councilmember Novak. A motion and a second to approve conditional use permit with the 2 additional conditions. One based upon noise, one based upon architectural standards and attorney review and the costs. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed?
Not opposed to all. I don't want
Abstain.
to have any arbitrary thoughts here.
Motion
Just
passes
abstain.
3-0 with 1 abstain.
I think just so it doesn't sound arbitrary, but I'm trying to say you can't have a permit because I think you guys did good work and the compromises and the site is probably the best it can be.
So
So
it was no on the first motion, abstain on the second
Yes.
Yep.
motion.
Yeah. All right. Next up,
I thought maybe the applicants would say thank you, but apparently not.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's after they were prompted.
all right. Next up on the agenda, ordinance 2022-04, amendment to the zoning ordinance. Cindy, would you like to introduce this subject to us?
Thank you. At the last planning commission meeting, we reviewed a number of different proposed ordinance amendments to address several different items that we've run across in the ordinance. We've been applying it to the document about a year and a half ago. A general overview of the items, of the more substantive items are in the memo that are packet. I'm happy to answer any questions we can have about any of them. The planning commission recommended approval of it with one difference from what the version is that I put in your packet. So during planning commission discussion, when they were reviewing the accessory structures portion of the ordinance, specifically the ones related to those very small accessory structures that are 20 square feet and under, they did recommend that the word not be removed from that section, so that those 200 square foot accessory or smaller structures would need to meet the accessory structure setback, where right now they don't have to. So they proposed that change as well. And we didn't really talk about it in the meeting a lot, but as you, for a number of your neighborhoods that have quite small lots already, that would be maybe challenging for some of those properties to meet that requirement. So I wanted to flag that for your consideration. And certainly as you in the future may have lots on city sewer and water that you're considering, those ones in addition would have some difficulty in trying to make that happen. They would still need to be outside of easement, they just wouldn't necessarily meet both setbacks.
Right, the same setback that a home or a primary structure would have to meet. Or
Well,
accessory structure even.
Or larger.
Right, right. And I agree with that. Thinking about that, you think about a small lot, septic, all that stuff going on in that lot to try and fit a small shed. You know, one that you go to Home Depot and buy the kit and assemble.
Yeah.
Could be very tough in some of those lots. Then the stuff becomes outdoor storage rather than inside storage. Interesting to note, one of my cousins is that works in planning in the city of Minneapolis. City of Minneapolis now requires a structure of this size to be built on their lots now because of the outside storage. Mhm.
Let's leave the city of Minneapolis to the city.
I agree 100%. It was more of the example of a small lot and what happens if you don't allow
I appreciate it. Yeah,
a
it's
shed to
interesting.
store stuff in,
Yeah.
right? It becomes outdoor storage.
You start to tie people's hands.
Guess we're in the wrong business.
So,
You taking input on it? I know it's late, I didn't know it was on the planning commission until after.
are you guys comfortable taking additional input on this?
I am, but
Changes?
take it to the point.
Point is, what I would like to do is. Let the commission know what questions to ask when new ordinance are proposed. I think I understand what seeing change, getting at with the lot size, you know, change there. I know some of the problems that are out there, but sometimes making a change. In an ordinance, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I got a couple of examples that I'm sure quickly. I would have done it with the planning commission had I known this was there. I didn't hear about it after the fact. It was done. So I don't mean to interrupt the meeting, but I think I can show you two quick examples that show what they're trying to accomplish. And it's not that I disagree with it. I just don't, I think we might be going a little bit too far. So. Your call. You want, you can see the actual language? I got it.
How are you gonna show it to us, Ted?
On that. Show you on a big flat. So I think what seems shame of getting that. And it's not that I don't agree with it, you agree with it.
Like, is it a platted lot or I can pull it up on GIS or is it a proposed lot?
Okay, it's preliminary approved,
Oh, okay, so it's not in GIS.
because this,
Okay.
you know, you and I talked about this. Okay, and what she's trying to get away from, and Shane's trying to get away from, it's like over in Crescent Curve, we got all these little lots that are kind of oddball. Okay, well, we're creating one right here in Creekside. Okay, this is the backyard, this is the front yard. The house being, see how the buildable area is so odd, you gotta shoehorn the house in. And I believe that's what you guys are trying to eliminate, and I agree with it, I think that's kind of silly. Okay, to create a lot like that, like if you go further. And the green is the buildable area, that's why I did it that way, and I really don't need to mess with it, had I known, I would have gone to the planning commission on this. Here, okay, now here's another one under the new ordinance. That wouldn't work, okay, this would be a school. Okay, because it's not rectangular in shape and it has a dog leg. Okay, this is a 5,000 square foot pad, this big box. This is really the size of a house and a garage that it uses up. Okay, here's the septic sites, one's here and one's over here. Okay, this wouldn't be allowed. The reason it's this shape, this buildable area shape, is because of this wetland. And Credit River has a lot of this, and I know it's made things difficult in Credit River with some of the lots, but and I argue I don't want these kind of lots. I don't personally, but to say an odd shaped building pad is not good, you might have people wanting to move out here now that don't want a big 2-acre lot to mow. They're okay living next to a wetland and having a natural area. That to say, no, we can't do that lot, we got to combine it. You're going to lower your density overall in the city.
And I think that one would be allowed because it can't exceed a ratio of 4 to 1. So whether or not that's 4 to 1.
Yeah, but if
You
you
know-
know, no dog.
Well, what it's saying is you can't have, a 5,000 square foot buildable area and then a strip that's like, yeah, that's
Here's
better.
the poster child, Chris, for what they're trying to avoid.
That's a better example.
This
Yeah.
is like the poster child of whatnot.
Right.
So.
And right now, we don't have any grounds to not approve that.
Right,
I know, and I'm.
And so that's what we're trying to do is correct the problem.
Yes.
Because then what
But with a ratio
happens-
of 4 to 1. And only having 20,000 square feet of buildable area inside there.
Yeah.
I think it only affect a lot that would be, you have a hard time selling anyway.
Okay, that's my feedback, and I'll
Yeah.
shut up, but I had to say something before it went too far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jane and I spent a little bit of time with that measuring.
Yeah.
A lot of companies have home class and even ones that we thought maybe they can develop would still meet this. So, but it would get rid of the
the oddballs, and then what really happens then, Ted, is the ones who buy 2.5 acres. And then build their house, and then they want to build the deck, and they can't because it doesn't meet the setbacks. And, from the wetlands or the septics, and then they can't build their accessory building.
I get it, and I agree with most of that, for what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But not everybody moving out to Credit River wants an accessory building, or a pool, or a sports bar.
Right,
So, we have to work with the lay of the land.
I understand that, Ted, but the problem becomes then they don't do their research. They know they're buying 2.5 acres, and then they want to build that sport court or that accessory building. And then who becomes after the developer has done and moved on.
Right, but, so really it's a consumer protection program. It's not really about the lots. If somebody proposes a house that doesn't fit in the approved buildable size, tell them, no, you can't do it.
Well, I don't
That's
know that we
okay.
have grounds to tell them no to at that point, though.
But if there's no room for an accessory building, and there's no room for a sport court, you can't get it to fit, they can't build.
Right,
So just tell them no. But to say, no, you can't build lots that are too small for all those things, we want all the lots to be able to accommodate anything a customer may want to do in the future. That's right, when I was reading through it, that's the thing I was running into. You can't just oversize everything so that one size fits all. There's some people on the edge of a wetland on the side of the hill, older couple, yeah, it's weird moving out to the country, but they want the space, they want the nature. They're good with the smaller lot. This one only fits a 2-car garage. okay, but I'm okay with that. For government to say, no, one size fits all, we're gonna do all this big so they can all have it. That's what I'm fearful of. I don't necessarily want to develop a small time lots.
I know you don't. Right.
But some people might, and it might fit the land that Credit River has. You're gonna lower your density. 2.5 acres, you don't have a lot of density already. This will lower density further. So that was all. And I just figured that part didn't come up with the planning commission. I apologize if I didn't know it was. That's my.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I can
Yes,
just
Shane.
provide a quick response to that. So what the current ordinance is asking for is 20,000 square feet of contiguous upland that doesn't exceed a 4:1 ratio. So we're talking a half an acre of upland that doesn't exceed a 4:1 ratio. So it's not a super large area, but this ordinance amendment would require that, hey, there's a little bit of yard around your proposed building pad. And some things that we see is, lots where there is no yard space. The builder maximizes the house size that will fit on, something that we have to say yes to. And then there's a retaining wall and a wetland down there. We see that, those wetlands are getting pushed on. And just in general, people want a little bit of yard around their property. So we think that this would be helpful, but also if we come into situations where we say, hey, this is a good lot, we didn't need for the ordinance to restrict this, maybe we have to look at it again. I looked at about a half a dozen rural lot ordinances, and we tried to make this
Consistent.
and not as restrictive as some of them.
Okay.
The other thing that hasn't been really talked about that we were trying to do also was to try to encourage developers to make sure that the land within a lot is accessible from that lot. We have lots in the city that, if somebody ever needs to build their secondary septic system, for example, you have to go through a neighbor's lawn because they can't even get to it from their own property. So
Because there's wetland in between. Right.
we're trying to encourage more thoughtful planning of what it's not like.
You were gonna say something?
Yeah, no, I was probably gonna ask some of the same questions that Shane already answered and ask some of the pros and cons that I think Ted already went through there. I guess the one question, Shane kind of answered it, but I don't want to pass ordinances to pass ordinances. I like the vision here, but how is the vision being balanced with the ordinance then going forward? What's going to be the expectation then if someone does come before this, say, I like this lot, I understand I don't have buildings, that passing an ordinance for the next person who's going to live there doesn't quite seem right. Are we just going to address that through planning and commission and allow them variances on a case-by-case basis when developers come to us or an individual comes to us and says, I really like this lot. This is exactly the weird shape I was looking for. How are we going to address that?
So I think the way the ordinance is drafted, it just contemplates that there could be those circumstances where you can't apply it as well. I'll use these lots that are just north of the NNG site, like for example, this one. You can see that it has this. Oh, sorry.
You stopped sharing them, but go.
Stop sharing. Yeah. So this is a property that's 2 parcels north of where that NNG proposal was at. And you can see it's a long lot.
Yeah, that's
The
split by
western
water.
middle and the western part is bordering the county road, upland. Technically, they don't have a way to get from here to there to maintain that area. It looks like there's some farmer that's probably renting the whole site from everybody. But in this sort of circumstance where there's no way to do a lot on the county road either, those are the kind of circumstances where it's not possible. We would have to allow for that segmentation to occur.
I appreciate that. I think right across the street with me with the ranch, there's that similar lot that I asked lots of questions about with that because I probably had some similar concerns. Can I just ask one other?
Absolutely.
It's just a housekeeping question. There was a lot of changes there, like the animal hospitals. like from 20 to 25 and some of the Staples stuff. Can you just give some background? Either I missed conversations or like, is there a future at which we plan on 25 animal hospitals? So we better be ready. I'm just asking, like, some of those changes, I was just kind of going, where are these coming from? Not that I really had any feeling about them either way. They just seem like
Yeah.
they're housekeeping items, but what is the reason we're sweeping that part of the house, I guess?
There are housekeeping items that I've noticed as I've looked things up for people and maybe found an inconsistency, or I think in one of the cases, maybe it was the animal hospital, there was one number and then the number in front of it was a different number.
Okay, so it was just words.
Yeah.
Okay, and then some of the other stuff. Okay, thank you. I think that helps with that. I just read it line by line and then some of the lines I started going, wait,
Yeah.
what? Yeah.
Yeah, so we keep a list of all the ones that are, you know, that we notice along the way and then try to periodically.
Clean up. Any other questions? Otherwise, you guys are comfortable with that? Motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Al. Anybody ready to second?
Yeah, I can second.
Second by Councilmember Stevens. So a motion and a second to approve the updates to approve ordinance 2022-04. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Shane, MS4. Thanks, Ted.
Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, this is a requirement of our MS4 stormwater permit. At least one time annually, we are required to open up the floor to the public, give them an opportunity on to speak on the stormwater pollution prevention program. I did include in the SharePoint our 2021 annual report. That's just our annual report of all the activities that we performed last year. Just as a reminder, we are about a year in now on a new 5-year permit. And so we're getting close to some timeframes for implementing a couple new measures. One other housekeeping item that I have to talk to the city about doing is having an ordinance that regulates pets. So that's one of the new requirements, the other one's also. So we'll have to look at that going into the fall. But this is not a public hearing. It's just an opportunity for the public to give input. So I asked you, Mr. Mayor, to open it up to public input.
Okay, at this time, if anybody would like to give input on our MS4 stormwater pollution program, if you'd please step to the pulpit, state your name and address.
So, Mr. Mayor, if we can just be sure to note in the minutes that no one spoke on this item.
Yeah. Okay,
We're not picking up coyote poop, Shane. I just want to let you know.
so without any comment from the public, we'll close the comment period and note that in the minutes that there was no public comments. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the 2023 to 2027 capital improvement plan. Shane, that's also you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in the SharePoint, with item 5.4 draft 5-year CIP. Just want to note, I apologize. I had a little bit of version control and this morning realized that we had the wrong version in here. So I swapped that out, but really to summarize, we're getting caught up on our road maintenance. 5-10 years ago, we were in a situation where we were way behind. All of our roads were in kind of tough shape. They're really showing their age. Now we don't have as many capital projects coming up in the next 5-year term. We have the County Road 27 turn lanes, which we've been talking about for a while now. We're waiting on a cooperative agreement, Scott County, or to implement that project. And then we have a couple of overlays, the territory development, Palomino, West Side Drive, Pebblebrook. Those roads are remaining out there for overlay based on our schedule. And then we have Longview Lane, which was originally on our schedule for this year. We had the public improvement hearing. The residents were not in favor of it. We moved to that so that we kicked it to the end of our capital improvement program. So you'll see that in the year 2027. Other than that, it's really just maintenance of our roads. We used to perform seal coating of our roads, and just, this year was our first year with the new microsurfacing process, so, we did have some complaints on the microsurfacing in regards to the roughness. And if we move forward with this practice, it's going to be something that we're gonna have to deal with moving forward. It's similar, the microsurfacing is similar to chip sealing, and that there's a layer of oil and a layer of rocks, so it's rough by design. We're just not gonna get away from that if we're doing any kind of maintenance. One thing I.
Did you turn your microphone on, by the way, off this? Hold it down. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
So one thing that I did notice, we received some complaints right away. I came down Thursday of last week, looked at the roads. I think just from Tuesday when they finished, to Thursday, the condition had improved slightly. And now I came down a little early again tonight and drove the roads again, and you can actually see the wheel paths where people are driving. There's still some sheen left, but the microsurface project is kind of continues to work in it as you will by traffic. And the rocks either kind of embed themselves, or if they're loose enough, they just fall to the wayside.
So with that, let me ask the question then, Shane, is that something where in that application, especially in the cul-de-sacs, it seemed to be fine on the straight paths. Is there any other part of that process that they can do different to make that seem any better? Is that just the way that it's applied and?
Yeah, I really don't think it is. I mean, a lot of people get it confused with hot mix.
Right.
It kind of looks like hot mix,
Yeah.
right? It's black,
Yep.
there's aggregate in it. But it's not hot at all. It's not
Mhm.
300 degrees like hot mix is, and it's not compatible. So,
Right.
They could run a roller on it, but it probably would just do
Make more of a mess than,
yeah, more harm than good.
yeah.
One thing that I noticed is actually the straightaways are actually smoother than I would expect. And
I was surprised about that as well. Because
Right,
when I've seen it applied in other places in the past, it's been rougher than what that turned out to be.
right, yeah, so it's almost like they got the straightaways too smooth,
Mhm.
and it makes the cul-de-sacs look
Right.
rougher in comparison, but.
So again, just because the alternative, the old process that we used to do, coat with oil, loose gravel on top, it would sit for 2 weeks or more with loose gravel on top. We'd come through, sweep whatever's left that's loose off. For the next couple of years, loose gravel would be coming off that, shedding off that part, that layer we put on, and whatever that oil trapped in there would stick and create our surface, but it'd be rough for, I mean, you couldn't roller skate or.
Not without losing a feeling.
Right? Where this appears to be, it's encapsulating more of the aggregate rather than half of it being swept away and all that, for the 2 weeks that's being caught in people's tires, hitting cars, drug in the driveways, right?
That is correct, and if you remember, whenever we did a seal coating
Mhm.
project, we'd also receive lots of phone calls
Yep.
right away about the loose aggregate, of
Mhm.
how it's being tracked into their.
House,
their garages,
driveway,
their houses. And so we're gonna receive, some complaints with either maintenance practice, but really the reason that we're doing it is because we're trying to recognize that life extended. So
Right.
by applying this, the research says that it extends the life by 8 to 9 years. That achieves a lower life cycle cost.
Mhm.
So of course, my recommendation is to continue with this practice. In our experience, it becomes smoother over time, so
Mhm.
we'll probably, as we continue with this warm weather and traffic runs over it, I think you actually see the get a little bit smoother, and then with winter plowing, sometimes that knocks a little bit of the
High spots.
small ridges off, but I measured the ridges, there's nothing that's over a quarter inch, so
Mhm.
we're not talking there's rock, it's a lot of appearance, or mostly appearance.
Right.
Uh,
Functionally, the application is what we expect.
Right, functionally that is. So,
Mhm.
I guess my recommendation, it's important to provide this draft capital improvement plan to you now, because it allows us to do some financial modeling,
Mhm.
set budgets and whatnot, but I guess my ask of the city council is before we, maybe give the final, say, whether or not we're continuing our microservices, let's wait out, a couple of weeks, just like we would with a chip seal. A couple of weeks to a month and reassess whether or not it's something that we want to move forward with.
Yeah.
Regardless, I think we want to maintain our city streets. We want to achieve that lower life cycle cost. And so if it's not microsurfacing, it'd be something similar, but really. Microsurfacing and
Or chip seal.
They're kind of
Provide the
two-
same.
Right, the two practices that are.
Together.
So I wanted to hit on that quickly, and then I also wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of highlights. So if we scroll to the year 2024. I have Hampshire Avenue with the parentheses development driven pencil. So now this is not something that we have been planning for. It's not something that would occur if development does not happen. However, we have knowledge that a developer has some contracts or at least some kind of land rights on the properties and intends to submit a development application at some time. So our thinking is that it's better to plan for it and do some financial modeling. So if it is necessary, we had more time to digest it and figure out how we're gonna fund that. Most likely, this would be funded with municipal state aid funds. We could also ask for a developer contribution, and all that would flush out later on if we actually have development. So again, it's highlighted because it's not something that doesn't happen unless several prerequisites also happen.
Okay.
And Shane,
did you have a question on that?
Wouldn't that be 100% paid by the developer?
That is something that we could negotiate. Normally, municipal state aid roads are what we call collector roads, and so their primary function isn't just to serve the development. It's to get traffic from the development to another collector road or a higher level road. Generally, we don't allow driveways on our collector roads. So this would be a road that the developer would have to plan for, possibly dedicate right of way, in which they could not access with driveways. It would be a negotiation, but a lot of times municipal state aid roads are paid for with municipal state aid funds.
I was just going back to Michael Sabota's comment, always development pays its own ways. I'd understand. All right.
The only other thing is publishing, if we follow the bond cycle, that would be fine.
So I'm guessing the other two comments were on that last page.
That is correct. In the year 2027, I have 800,000 program, kind of a placeholder for sewer to the Pearson property. And I have 500,000 the placeholder to water to the Pearson property. So both of those projects would be a prerequisite of serving the country court development with sewer and water and reconstructing those roads. Which means that if we were to plan these in 2027, the earliest a country court project to go would be probably 2028, or possibly in conjunction in 2027. As you recall, we had a neighborhood meeting last fall with that neighborhood. I think we're about due to have our next neighborhood meeting, so that's something that we should be looking at scheduling fairly soon. We've been talking with Scott County Septic a little bit, and they're starting to work on some mapping of known septic systems that are failing, as well as septic systems that just based on age are likely to need replacement or repair in the near future. One thing that Scott County has told us is that we have a project scheduled or programmed into our CIP kind of a date that we're targeting, they may allow house sales and transition or transactions to occur to help upgrade the septic, knowing that this is out there in the horizon. That would be beneficial, because the last thing we want to do is have somebody spend $20,000 or $30,000 upgrading the septic system, and then we come through with the sewer project 4 or 5 years later. So, again, there's a lot of variables that affect this. We could have to work for the Pearson property, it has to work for their mining operator. We have some homework to do in order to realize this, but the first thing to do is kind of pick a date that we're targeting, and then have more of those discussions. So again, it's highlighted because it's not certain. This date could move out if we're not ready for it. It's possible that it would move up, we have a lot of residents that need a project to address family septic. So,
Well, and just the conditions of the roads in that neighborhood, we spend $20,000 or $30,000 patching it there every year as well.
Right.
Okay,
Oh, we threw a dart at the board, Shane.
you gotta start somewhere.
We do, and that's, those people have asked
They
for
need a
that
date.
over and over again.
That's what they want, is a date.
Yeah.
Mhm. I think that after the neighborhood meeting, that they started to become relatively comfortable with the idea of the project. They just didn't, the next question was when.
I think they'll be surprised that it's that far out possibly, but
It's only 4 years.
yeah.
And as far as our budget goes. And to come up with, again, this just isn't just doing the road, right? There's the complications of where the lift station is, the connection to the neighborhood, and the area that's in between. So, no, the good news is there's still, when that corridor was rebuilt, they facilitated some of that.
Right.
Lots more discussions to be had. It was,
There is.
it was a good discussion that we had with that neighborhood.
But you need to have the date on the calendar to push you to do the rest of them. Okay. So no action on this tonight, just,
there's no pressing need to take action on this tonight. We would like to, obviously approve it within the foreseeable future, but
right,
given the circumstances and how new microcircuit is to us.
Yep.
I guess my advice would be to, use this information for budgeting, for financial modeling. And then, before we approve it, let's have a discussion again, make sure we're comfortable with the practice of microcircuit.
okay.
And
Do you have any
I was
questions?
just, my liaison report, just to speed it up quick, was I feel quite a bit because of the roads piece, and
Yeah.
the mayor and I talked about that. Is it helped. I learned a lot about the microsurfacing. And I think that the way you explained it was helpful. That I think it was different, and it visually doesn't look pleasant like you'd want it on your driveway. And I think that's what kind of veered us that way. And I think that we just got to keep a close eye on it. And I know you're 2 weeks now, but I think it'll be interesting to see after many heat pool cycles and also the plows to see what the visual is in
When the
the
color changes.
yeah, in the visual of it. Because if I remember right, a question I had that we still don't probably know, because there wasn't a lot of it, is I would guess probably the original applications of that we knew a lot about were like higher traffic, higher speed roads. They were getting lots of good outcomes with it. I think we'll have the opportunity to see what it looks like and how it looks after, some of these cul-de-sacs and stuff that just aren't going to get enough traffic to ever smooth it out. Do the residents feel that that's the right look that we need for our roads? And then does it actually provide the dollar return on the investment for the infrastructure?
That's the important piece.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions on that?
Nope.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, we'll take another look at it after we get that time to simmer. Cool. All right, next up on the agenda, council member liaison updates and council member reports. Anybody have anything tonight?
Nope. Done and done.
Done and done. Brent.
I just want to mention, Amy gave a great report on the election, but she didn't call attention to the fact that she managed 8 absentee voting opportunities that we had here at Credit River. And a lot of learning and not the easiest process in terms of accessing all of the information, but she led that group, and I want to make sure that she gets credit for managing those 8 separate absentee election opportunities that people had here at Red Rivers.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy.
We're in the middle. Amy did a really good job, but also Brent, others put in a lot of work on short notice too, and we really appreciate that.
Okay, sounds good. I've got nothing either. So move on to approving list of claims tonight. Tonight we have $53,111.40 in claims to approve. Is there any of those that anybody'd like to consider separately? Otherwise, I take a motion to approve the claims for tonight.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Al.
Second.
Thank you, Andrew. A motion and a second to approve the claims in the amount of $53,111.40. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none motion, and that motion passes. Can't talk anymore. Next up, motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Andrew?
I gotta get to work.
I'll second it. Al doesn't.
All right, motion by.
Continue CPR, I'll be there soon.
Motion by Councilmember Stevens, second by Councilmember Lawrence. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everybody.